if we take any object, not just the tingling sensation of the face, but if we take a flower or a glass or a chair or anything at all, before we know anything about that apparent object, the first thing we can say for absolute certain is, it is. In other words, this isness, or the existence of things, is not a property of any one particular thing. It is what all objects share in common. So because this isness is not the property of any particular object, it is colorless, it is empty, it has no objective, definable qualities. So this is the first emptiness, and it is an emptiness that is confirmed by contemporary physics. If you look into the nature of matter, what you find there is empty. This empty being is appearing in this moment. It takes the shape of this vibration, or it comes into existence as this vibration. And then this morning we explored that further, and we had to admit there was one more thing we could say for absolute certain about the experience of this tingling vibration, and that is that it is known. It's not just being and vibration. If this vibrating being was not known, we would not be able to assert in the first place, it is. So there is also knowing. Now when we look into this knowing, as we saw to begin with this morning, in order to visualize it, we added a spatial quality to it, and we called it a knowing field or a knowing space. As I described, this was just to enable us to think about it. And then as a halfway stage we contemplated the existence of this vibration suspended, as it were, in this knowing field. And the knowing field is empty. It's empty of objects. So this is the second emptiness, the emptiness of consciousness. The first emptiness is the emptiness of pure being that we find when we explore matter. The second emptiness is the emptiness of thought. If we explore thought, if we explore mind, the second emptiness is the emptiness that we find at the heart of the mind, at the heart of that which knows. That is pure knowing. So these are what appear at first sight to be two emptinesses. The emptiness of matter, or things made out of being, and the emptiness of thought, or mind made out of knowing, or pure consciousness. And if we didn't take our investigation any further, we could legitimately say there are two kinds of emptiness. One called being and one called knowing. But then as we went on in our meditation this morning, to having expanded this vibration so that it fills the whole field of knowing, then we go even more close and we ask, what is the difference between the substance of the vibration and the substance of the field of knowing? Don't forget that vibration is made out of this empty being, and the knowing in which it supposedly appears is made out of the emptiness of knowing. And then we look for the line between these two emptinesses. It's not there. It's not there. That is the great discovery of the non-dual understanding. That the reality out of which objects, things are made, pure being, the reality out of which matter is made, and the reality out of which knowledge or the mind is made, which seem to be two, I, the inside self made of mind, and you or it, the outside other or world made out of matter. if we explore them both, yes, they're both empty. The emptiness of being and the emptiness of knowing, or pure consciousness. But if we go further, not intellectually, I'm giving you an intellectual explanation now, but these two emptinesses are identical. And that is the great understanding that lies at the heart of all the great religious, spiritual and philosophical traditions, and is formulated in the terms of that particular religion. So 2,000 years ago, it was formulated with the words, I and my Father are one, just because that was the contemporary language of that particular place and era. I, that is the essential, the ultimate reality of what I, this mind that knows, is. And the essential reality of that is known are called my Father, the ultimate reality, infinite being, are identical. Once that shared reality has been overlooked, and these two, there seem to be two emptinesses, we have to find new names for these two emptinesses, and we call this one, the reality of the mind, time, and we call this one, the reality of matter, space. Time and space are both empty, they're both approximations. From the point of view of the separate self, time is the background of the mind, which is different from space, which is considered the background of matter. And these two seem to be two emptinesses. But if we really explore our experience carefully, these two, time and space, are just a very thin watercolor wash, two different shades of watercolor on the same piece of paper, the same ultimate reality of all experience. The experience of what I, the inside self, and you or it, the outside object, other or world, truly is. And the experience of love or beauty is that understanding. It's very specific. There's no grey area about the way I use these words. So knowing is the essence of all experience. There is no experience that is not made of knowing. The knowing is consciousness, the stuff out of which all experience is made. In pure knowing is colourless. It is, as it were, consciousness at rest. There's no form there, no movement there, no colour, no shapes, no objects, no thinking, no feeling. It's just pure consciousness, pure knowing. But when knowing, we could say, vibrates within itself, moves within itself, it causes a form, a structure. Mm-hmm. That's experience, that's mind. And what I mean by mind is thinking, feeling, sensing, and perceiving. So thinking, the generic name for thinking, feeling, sensing, and perceiving is mind or experience.
Okay.
So where we started this morning with experiencing would be the sum total of all thinking, feeling, sensing, and perceiving. If you mix all thinking, feeling, sensing, and perceiving together, you get experiencing. But the essence of experiencing, the stuff that is really there, is pure knowing. And sensing would just be one aspect of experience or mind. Thinking, feeling, sensing, perceiving. And perceiving itself is a generic word for the five sense perceptions: seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, and smelling.
Okay, got it. Okay.
Yeah. So there's thinking and imagining. There's feeling and sensing, Thinking and imagining, that's what we normally call mind. I use the word mind to describe the entirety of thinking, sensing and perceiving, but normally, conventionally, the word mind means thinking and imagining. And then there's feeling and sensing, that's our experience of the body. And then there's perceiving, that's seeing, hearing, touching, tasting and smelling. That's the way we experience the world. So if you mix all of these together, I just call them thinking, feeling, sensing and perceiving.
And that's
it's the full spectrum of our experience, both our so-called internal experience, our so-called external experience. That's what I call mind, the activity of consciousness. I also call it experience, it's the same. But the essence of mind, or the essence of all experience, is pure knowing or pure consciousness. So we could say that mind is consciousness in motion, and consciousness is mind at rest.
Okay.
There's not one thing called consciousness and another thing called mind, just as there's not one thing called a movie, a screen, and another thing called a movie. The movie is the activity of the screen, a movement, an oscillation of the screen. Just as mind or experience, that's thinking, feeling, sensing and perceiving, is a movement of consciousness, a vibration of pure knowing. Do you mean that you're not sure, for instance, that the feeling that the sound of the crow takes place in your body is this collapse of the knower and the known that I'm speaking of?
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay. Let's see if the crow is going to cooperate with us. I don't think so. Okay. We have to use something else. So the first thing to see is that the sound doesn't take place in your body. Just shut your eyes. And the only reason for shutting your eyes is just to take out the visual perception of the body, just to make this simpler. So when our eyes are shut, our only knowledge of the body is a sensation, this cloud-like amorphous sensation. Yeah. Now, see that cloud-like sensation is taking place in you, in this field of experiencing or field of knowing. Yes. And just as it were, reach into the cloud with your tactile imagination and find out what is this cloud, what is inside of it, what is the substance that it's made of, what do you find on the inside of it?
I don't find anything.
It's just made of the knowing of it, yes? So now ask yourself, I'll have to be the crow in this experiment. So with the sound of this voice, is it your experience that the sound of this voice is taking place inside this cloud? Listen to the voice and go to the experience of the cloud. Is the voice taking place inside the cloud? Or is the cloud just cloud all the way through, with nothing inside it other than the knowing of it? The sound of the voice, let's bring it a little bit closer. Your only knowledge of the sound of the voice is the experience of hearing. Yes? And your only experience of the body is the experience of sensing. Does hearing take place in sensing?
No.
It doesn't.
No.
You see, we've been deeply conditioned by our culture to think that hearing takes place inside here. And we superimpose that belief onto our experience so that it feels as if the sound takes place inside me the body. And then we forget that we have just been educated to believe this, we have been rehearsing it for decades, and we think it's the absolute fact of our experience. Sounds take place in here. But then when we go to our experience and look at the experience of hearing, look at the experience of sensing, hearing doesn't take place inside sensing.
So what about music, which is the big thing for me? You know, going to a concert and feeling it feels like, I mean, I'm going to have to try again, you know, at a concert, feels like it just moves in this, maybe it causes sensation.
Next time you go to a concert, shut your eyes for a couple of minutes before the concert begins and meditate in the way that we're meditating here. In other words, know yourself as this, it's not even a vast open field of sensitivity, it's a limitless open field of just pure sensitivity, pure knowingness. That one, it's not, it's just made out of empty knowing. You can't find an edge to it, you can't find a shape to it, you can't find an age to it, you can't find a gender to it. Without reference to memory, you would have no idea that you were sitting in a concert hall. Or just so establish yourself in your simple experience that you just are this limitless, sensitive, luminous in the sense that it lights up experience, this knowing openness. And then when the music begins, just see that the music is just made of hearing. Hearing is a modulation of this knowing. No new substance comes into existence when the music begins. It's just this pure knowing that is now taking the shape of hearing. The music it's not just appearing in you, it's made out of you. Try ask yourself, where does hearing, that this is the music, where does the hearing end and the knowing of it begin? Do it with this voice now. Because our only knowledge of this sound is the experience of hearing. Where does hearing end and the knowing of it start? It doesn't make sense. Hearing is only the knowing of it. And what is that knowing made out of? It's the intimacy of, it's yourself, this transparent, empty openness that takes the shape of all experience. Listen to music like that. You'll see that ideas about music taking place inside a body, I mean, they're so remote from experience that there's no body, no physical body present when you're listening to music. There's just this field, this field of sensitivity or openness or knowing, and it just suddenly takes the shape of hearing.
So is it a story that
Yes.
I tell myself,
Yes.
that the body is
Yes.
is thrilled, you know, or is
The body
relaxed?
is
or
thrilled, yes, that's true. So why is the body thrilled? It's because some music has the power within it to take us to this experiential understanding that I'm speaking of. It kind of dissolves the sense of separateness. So when this takes place, the body, which has been feeling on behalf of a separate self all day long, is now bathed is now brought to this experiential understanding. The body relaxes. It opens up. It no longer has to serve and protect and aggrandize the separate self. The body relaxes. There is and that is the aftershock, the after effect of this understanding on the body that tension, the knots in the body are relaxed, and we may find ourselves with tears running on it. We may find goose pimples. We may find us a kind of joy that makes us just want to burst out. I mean, all sorts of different ways. These are all signs of a body that has been serving a separate self, being relieved of the tyranny of the separate self, and as a result there is this relaxation, which feels, and that is pleasurable. That is a wave of pleasure that passes through the body. But the pleasure that passes through the body is not itself the happiness or the beauty. It's an after effect of it in the body that inevitably comes or goes. But what the music in this case is pointing towards is the real nature of our experience, this seamless intimacy of our experience. That doesn't come and go. That realization is the experience of beauty or love or happiness. And this pleasurable wave in the body is just an after effect, that a lovely after effect. Enjoy it. But don't think that that is happiness, because when it goes, which it will, you'll think that happiness has gone with it. No, happiness doesn't come and go. Happiness is the nature of all experience. The music is like going to satsang. Good music is, music that comes from this understanding. It's like satsang. It's not like satsang, it is satsang. That's what art is, satsang.
If I formulate an image of something, my kitchen table or whatever, I can never figure out where it is I'm seeing that. I can see it, but I don't know where it is,
That's a very profound realization, because if you were to, let's replace your kitchen table with the chair in front of you. So where is that chair taking place? So the chair is something that you see. It's a perception, yes? So where is that perception taking place? Well, the first thing thought is going to say is, well, it's taking place in this room. But hang on, this room is also a perception. Yes? So is thought telling us that the perception called a chair is taking place in a perception called a room? Can one perception take place in another perception? Can we have two perceptions simultaneously? No. It is not our experience that objects take place in space. Our only knowledge of space, when I say knowledge, I mean experiential knowledge. Our only knowledge of space is perception. That perception takes place in something which itself has no location.
Right.
So yes, your observation is absolutely right.
Thank you.
And then I had the experience that actually sound was not coming from out there in space, in the material world. It was in awareness here. And the experience was quite wonderful, of a very palpable here-ness. And there was like space in the objective materialistic sense collapsed, and I was there. And even though I was hearing sounds that my logical mind were saying came from out there, they were happening here in this here-ness,
Yes.
which is the only word I could give it.
Yes.
And the wonderful thing about it is that it was I could only use the word, it was very palpable.
Yes.
That was more real than anything I could feel out there in the material space-time world.
Yes.
And I just wanted to stay there. And I didn't have any sense of duality or anything else. And I didn't also have any sense that things were really bizarre or unusual. There was it was part of the wonderfulness
Sort
of
of
it.
familiar.
Yeah.
Yes.
But then in the last few days, that experience happened again. Those sounds were not bothering me at all. They were not out there in space impinging on my personal here-ness.
Yeah.
And it was very wonderful.
Atmananda Krishna Menon relates a very pivotal moment in his own understanding when he was meditating and going into Nirvikapa Samadhi, and he heard a horse and cart coming down the road, and the sound started at a distance and he got closer and closer, and as it got closer and closer it became more and more disturbing to him and prevented him from going into Nirvikapa Samadhi. And when the sound was at its loudest, he suddenly had this spontaneous realization: the sound is inside me, in this here-ness that you speak of. It's not outside of me, and how could something inside of me disturb me? And at that moment he realized that all experience was inside, appearing in himself, and all there is in himself, out of which experience could be made, is himself.
That's it. That was the...
And from then on, it was not possible for anything to be disturbing any longer. Now there may be, as you say, the habit of feeling that things are outside us is so strong that in almost all cases, even after a very genuine experience, such as you describe, which as you rightly describe, is even more real than the reality we once attributed to
That
objects.
was the wonderfulness of
it. Yes, it has an absolute certainty about it that objective reality can never have. So it has a degree of reality even greater than the reality we normally attribute to things. Even when such an experience has taken place, the possibility of being fooled by Maya still remains. The exact same experience happened to me when I was staying shortly after I met Francis in Northern California. And it was a similar thing. There was a dog. We were having a conversation in such like this, and there was a dog barking on the other side of the valley, and I heard the sound, and I said to him, a little bit frustrated, "What that sound? That dog is so obviously on the other side of the valley. What do you mean? It's all inside me?" And I remember the frustration I felt at hearing what he was saying, somehow intuiting that it was true. But I thought, no, if I go to my experience, it's way over there in the distance. That is indisputable. I was sitting on the floor, and he said, "Close your eyes and put your hands on the floor." And I remember closing my eyes and putting my hands on the floor like this, and then he said, "Where does that sensation take place?" And for some reason, it was just crystal clear that this new sensation, this new experience took place inside me. And it came with the same certainty that you described. It's even if the Buddha himself had appeared and said, no, that sensation takes place outside of you, I would have said, no, it's inside me.
Yes, I understand.
Absolutely know that experience takes place in me. And then I went back to the barking dog, and it was so clear that the sound was inside. That no experience had ever taken place that was outside of myself. It was felt with such certainty. However, that didn't prevent the old habits of conceiving objects outside of myself from reappearing, because I had been rehearsing this habit successfully for 30-odd years, nearly 40 years, that it came back. So the kind of meditations we do here, and the yoga that we do here, are loving cooperations in which we encourage experience to be felt in this way all the time. Having felt it once, you know it's your experience. You can always go back there. You know where to go to access this experience. But you don't want it to be an extraordinary experience that happens every now and then when you've been sitting peacefully in meditation. You want it, first of all the time in meditation, but also you don't just want it on a 7-day retreat. You want it when you go home, when you go shopping, when you're driving, when you're having a difficult conversation with your bank manager or your neighbors or your whoever, whatever. You want it all the time. Why? Because it's the reality, it's true all the time. You want to live with what is true all the time. So that's why I said this morning, these yoga sessions are a kind of halfway, a stepping stone between our conversations and the outside world. That they're a way in which we cooperate with the realignment of our experience at all levels with this understanding. Now that experience is clear to you, it's your experience now. You don't need an outside authority, although you can still participate in all these different ways, because there are many different ways of coming to this experience. You want as many different tools as possible, and in the end you start making up your own tools. You start taking yourself back there until you find that you stay there longer and longer and longer, and less situations in life have the possibility of pulling you out of this feeling understanding. If we give our attention to the experience of being aware, the experience of being aware is invisible, although it pervades all experience. Most people completely overlook the experience of being aware, although all there is to experience is being aware of experience. So what is powerful is to recognize that the experience of being aware is the most substantial element of our experience. It is indestructible. It is ever present. It is never harmed or stained or modified by experience. So far from being a little trivial byproduct of matter, far from being this fragile, fleeting entity that is subject to birth and growth and decay and death, it is the most intimate, the most readily available, the most substantial element of experience. It is that which all experiences have in common. It's not as if it's hidden, it's not buried deep in experience somewhere. It's shining in all experience, the simple experience of being aware. That is what is powerful. To give that our attention, to place that on the altar of our attention, to honor that in our lives. We dedicate our hearts to the presence of awareness. We give our minds to the multiplicity and diversity of experience, but our hearts are dedicated to God, dedicated to God's infinite being. That is where the power of acknowledging what is in fact already present and intimate and close and available and open, ever present in all experience. That is what is powerful. That is what in time infiltrates our thoughts and feelings, and in time it begins to permeate our activities and our relationships.